What we're learning, Cyril, is that that bizarre address now appears to at least make a bit more sense. A source with a very close knowledge of the negotiations ongoing between Robert Mugabe and the military leadership, that is the de facto power, telling us that, in fact, a resignation letter has been drafted for the president and that he has agreed to the terms of those resignation, including, in fact, immunity for himself and the First Lady, Grace Mugabe, as well as some sweeteners in terms of keeping property and potentially cash that he has certainly amassed over his more than 30 years in power. Now, it makes more sense now in a way because that speech where everyone thought that he would resign coming on state television here on Sunday evening in Zimbabwe, it appears, says that source, was to give a constitutional veneer on this apparent coup, because in that statement several times he basically said that what the military did was right constitutionally without saying it in quite so much clarity, and that gives the generals more of this veneer of a constitutional process where in fact this was a coup in most respects on the streets of Zimbabwe. So that source telling us that the terms have been agreed, the resignation letter has been drafted, and for it to be all above board, it needs to be sent to Parliament for that to happen. But I have to say that there have been so many twists and turns in the story, and until Robert Mugabe officially steps down or is impeached, you know, the story is not over. But that is the latest information I can bring you, Cyril.
No, it's absolutely not over, David. I mean, that much is clear. And do we have any sense of any kind of timeline? If we are to accept the version that we are told by this source, this high-up source here, with knowledge of this transaction with current President Robert Mugabe, do we have any sense of the timeline that would bring him to resign and step down and no longer be president?
Well, certainly the generals would be pressuring Robert Mugabe to resign as opposed to being impeached, because then they could put these sweeteners, like we learned from that source, that they would have immunity. Now, that is maybe something that he would not have should he be impeached by Parliament. The timeline is really ticking pretty quickly. In the next few hours, his own party has said if he didn't resign, they would impeach him, and that would be noon local today, so just a few hours from now. This also plays into what we've been learning for several days now from an opposition source last week, telling us that this apparent coup was in fact long in the planning by the Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa, who was sacked by Mugabe and really kicked off this entire chain of events. This doesn't appear to be the military stepping in with some kind of chaotic move to grab forcefully control. At this stage, at least, they've taken very methodical steps to try make it seem like this is a constitutional process rather than a grab of power by the barrel of the gun. And so this sort of continues that play acting in a way that has been going on in Zimbabwe. But 93-year-old Mugabe has really staved off challenges throughout his tenure. I don't see a way out for him, but certainly he might try.